Without further ado, it is my pleasure to turn it over to Kat Ladd to begin.
Thank you so much, Allie. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on our ongoing AI for Higher Education webinar series. Today's session focuses on the human element of AI, one that no doubt you've already felt the impact of: change management for AI in higher education. While AI has created some incredible opportunities for us, it also has created one of the biggest changes we've ever seen. To talk through some challenges and approaches, we've lined up this amazing panel. But before I dive into that, I've asked Carly Diggins, our change management leader in AI for higher education, to lay the foundation for the discussion. Carly, over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Welcome. We are so excited for this webinar. As Kat mentioned, my name is Carly Diggins, and I lead our change management and people team for our AI and higher ed capability here at Deloitte. I also do tech implementations, change management for that at Deloitte with many different clients. And then my doctoral research, I just got my doctorate last July from Vanderbilt University. So shout out if Vanderbilt is on the call. And my research is all about change management for AI. So I have been living and breathing all of this for the last few years. And I'm pretty sure my research partner is on the call, so shout out to you. So as we get started, let's start with the reality many of us are probably living right now. AI is showing up faster than we can manage it. We have students using it before policies even exist. Faculty have concerns about integrity. Staff are wondering what this means for their jobs. And meanwhile, institutions are still figuring out their strategy. They're still figuring out their use case prioritization. So what we have here is 6 common challenges that AI can impose. And what we have found is 1, exposure actually precedes guidance. This is, if you think about it, this is the first technology that's actually introduced in the home before the workplace. So we have people learning at all different levels, sometimes even in the dark and in all different areas. This also connects to the second piece of desire and curiosity is really high. Excitement is high for this, which is very different from other tech implementations we see in the past. If we have any change management people on the call, you know that our first step is to get awareness right away. We want people to understand what the change is and then move on to desire, move on to excitement. With AI, and this my research found this, we're actually seeing that it's flipped. So desire, excitement, all of that is actually there. But then the awareness, the what and how does this actually work at my workplace is lacking. So that is a really big challenge we're facing with AI. The next one is faculty and staff may feel replaced rather than actually reskilled. So that's something we really have to get ahead of the game for. We also have competing perceptions for a unified solution, a unified adoption. Our campuses were trying to get one big unified strategy here, but with students, staff, and faculty all having different lenses on AI, that can have a pretty big challenge. Another thing is the learning curve is really overwhelming. I know we might have some clients on the call right now who have just ended a really large ERP implementation or a tech implementation. So we have people going through those learning curves, those change management curves. At the same time, we're asking people to understand AI and what it even is. And then the next one is the last one I have here is a lack of shared vocabulary. So we might be hearing words like generative, predictive, things like that, and not really understanding what that is, or it's not even the same department to department. So making sure we have a shared vocabulary within our campuses. So as you can see, these are not just operational issues. These are actually change management people challenges. And if we don't address them intentionally, then we risk spinning those wheels. So AI doesn't just introduce new tools. It demands this fundamental shift in how we lead and how we think about change management and how we think about people. This is not just a tech adoption, it's a transformation in how we think, how we behave, how we teach, and how we build trust. So what does this mean for change management at this moment? Traditionally, change management is an item on your checklist. It's a comms plan. It's a training module. Very important. But for AI, we need to start thinking about change management as the paper your whole plan is written on. This is how we build buy-in. This is how we reduce fear, we increase clarity, and we shift our mindsets of people before we even roll out a strategy or a use case. So continuing with that, when we think about change management, like I mentioned, the training plans, timelines, tools, things like that, all of that still matters. I do that every single day with my clients. But AI introduces this new dynamic that we really need to think about that connects with those challenges I just talked about. So desire often outpaces that awareness. People are excited, but they're not clear on how or what for their workplace. I use ChatGPT probably 30 times a day in my personal life. I use it for what I want to make for dinner, what wine matches that dinner I just made, and things like that. That gets me really, really excited for it. But then when we come to the workplace, not having that exact clarity in those guidelines is what makes it really iffy. And that's that roadblock that we face. Stakeholders also interpret AI very differently with these different lenses. That's what I mentioned earlier with the students, staff, and faculty. Another big piece that I think is probably one of the most interesting and fascinating things about AI is adoption is happening without strategy. So tools are in use. People are using AI. But before we as a campus roll out our strategy, before we roll out our use case prioritization. And that is such the fascinating piece there. And then most importantly, it's a mindset shift, not just a skill set one. And this is the key difference there, is really trying to help our people think about this as coworkers, classmates, partners, tutors, even things like that. So this means that it can't be one and done. This has to be ongoing, responsive, and then really, really deeply human. So why does all this matter? Because AI is transforming how students learn, how faculty teach, and how institutions operate. So to do this well, we need more than technical readiness. We need cultural readiness, and we need people readiness. Change management isn't just helpful, but it's imperative to be able to remain competitive, resilient, and human-centered in an AI-driven future. So with that foundation, I am thrilled to hand it back to Kat as she introduces our panelists, leaders who are really living this work and can speak on what it looks like on the ground at real time. So I'll hand it back to you, Kat.
Thanks, Carly. We're going to do a quick poll just so we can see who is in the audience and who our panelists are actually speaking to as they answer these questions. So if you don't mind taking just a quick moment to talk about which stakeholders you primarily serve, we'll be able to see the results in just a moment. Okay. All right. Allie, would you mind sharing with us the results of this so our panelists can see? Fabulous. Okay, terrific. A lot of staff, but there's a nice group of other individuals here as well. Thank you all for joining. Appreciate this. All right, with that, I'll ask my panelists to come on and we'll get started on the first question. First, just take a moment to introduce yourselves and then talk about where your institution is on the AI journey, including maybe one or two AI initiatives that are currently happening. I'll start with you, Jim. If you don't mind going first, that'll be great.
Sure, absolutely. And thanks, Kat. Thanks for inviting me here. It's really super awesome to be here. Glad that we've got so many folks. Glad to see some fellow faculty members here and students and staff and everybody else that's here. My name is Jim Coker, and I'm currently the director of the Center for Biotechnology at Johns Hopkins University. I was asked to keep things short, so I'll say I've got a couple of undergraduate degrees from Oklahoma State, shout out to Oklahoma State, and a PhD from Penn State. Love Penn State. My faculty career started at UAB, so awesome UAB also. At UAB, I was a tenure line faculty member where my lab examined how organisms adapt to their environment using a bioinformatics approach. And again, to keep things short, I won't be academic and tell you all about that wonderful stuff, but I'll move on to say that since leaving active research, I've been an assistant dean and led multiple biotech and science degree programs. And so in my administrative capacity, I've been a big advocate for technology-based solutions to help students succeed. So I feel pretty comfortable saying that AI and AI-based tools have been a part of both my academic and administrative career in academia. So moving on to maybe the parts that you actually care about, which is what's going on at Hopkins and sort of around all of these things. And so right now, my institution is sort of jumping all in on its AI journey. And we have this Data Science and AI Institute that you may have heard about. This institute is really seen as part of the strategic plan for Hopkins. It fits into the 10 for 1 policy that we've got. So there's that part of stuff, and we're trying to hire a lot of new faculty in with all of that. But one of the other things that's sort of just happening right now is that we've launched a Hopkins AI Lab where faculty have access to this AI lab, and students are going to be able to have access to this as well, where everybody can sort of experiment in a safe place where you can use ChatGPT and Claude and Llama all free of charge.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I will send the same question over to you, James.
Good morning, at least here on the West Coast, good morning. Yeah, I began teaching here at San Diego State in the Educational Technology Department in 1999. I now serve as the Vice President for IT and Chief Information Officer. In terms of where we're at on our AI journey, I would say at SDSU, AI is not being done to faculty and staff, it's being done with faculty and staff. And we're working with, we have AI faculty and student fellows, and they helped us develop a very robust needs assessment that was done super inclusively. It started with an AI survey in 2023. And people often need evidence to grasp the magnitude of what's changing before they're ready to change themselves and their behavior. So we've used that data from the survey to create space for conversations. We also use the data from that survey to inform the development of a series of micro-credentials that we've rolled out to faculty, staff, and students. The micro-credential is now part of our first year experience, so a freshman seminar where students get exposed to what does it mean to use these tools responsibly, thinking about the costs of using these, whether it's the environmental costs, the social costs, or otherwise. So very much, using that data to create space for conversations and making it really clear that AI is not the next calculator. This is the next internet. It's much bigger than that. And it's a really profound disruption. And that has demanded more than just adaptation. It requires a really deep rethinking of what it means to be educated and employable and ethically engaged in this new world that we find ourselves in. So I guess the thing I would say just to end on in terms of this prompt is the importance of collaboration. Nobody can do this on their own. We need to partner, we need to leverage one another and learn from the efforts of one another and get out of our intersegmental silos, whether you're at a big private university or a regional comprehensive university. We really need to band together, and that means with our industry partners as well.
Thank you. Cheryl, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thank you, Kat. Thanks for Deloitte for hosting the seminar here today. So Cheryl Reardon, Chief Human Resources Officer and Associate VP at the University of Iowa. I am entering my 35th year on our campus. I've worked all over our campus in a variety of roles. If you don't know anything about Iowa, we're a Research One institution, heavily focused on our research enterprise. Our headcount is 34,000, and we have an academic medical center, which the university owns. Our student population is steady and in some respects growing a little bit, which is good news for us as a public Research One. Major priority for us is in helping with our healthcare across the state in rural Iowa. And so that kind of informs some of our strategy. Much like the other two panelists, our AI strategy at the University of Iowa is tied to our strategic plan and strategic priorities. And we have funding sources to help fund the nuggets and the ideas. I'll share one of the ways that we scaled, much like the other two panelists, but let me give you an example of something that is impacting human resources. We started the journey back with Deloitte as our partner back in February of 2023, and we did a half-day seminar, and we teamed up with Research Enterprise, and we did that because of the transactional work in both those organizations. In a past life, I did a little bit of a stint in the Research Enterprise, so knowing how that work flows on a day-to-day basis and the administrative needs of both of those units, the two teams came together. And it was wonderful because Deloitte could give us a little bit about what's possible, how do we manage the risk, which is always a question, and then how do we start the idea generation. From that, we identified some use cases. And the use case that we identified and we're actually launched is a internal-facing HR bot. And it's not one that's outside. It's not one for a normal employee to use. It's really to be an expert HR professional, anticipating that we've got some headwinds ahead of us in the HR enterprise. We know efficiency is going to be a big ticket item. We're going to have to manage that, but also an aging workforce on people that have been at the University of Iowa for decades who serve in HR roles. And we're going to need to figure out how we replace that knowledge. And this is a tool that we've been able to practice with. I will say we entered into this as an opportunity to really prototype it. It doesn't cost very much to stand up these bots. And I'll share a little bit later on in my comments about what we learned and how important it is to make sure your documentation is in good order before you start down this path.
Thank you, Cheryl. Manuel, would you like to go next?
Sure, it'll be my pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and hello to my fellow panelists as well. My name is Manuel Cuevas Trizan. I'm the Vice President for Human Resources, or CHRO, at Harvard University since 2021. And it's been quite a journey, but I would speak in the plural because I think depending on where we sit in the organization, as Carly referenced earlier, the stages of that journey have progressed at different pace. I would say that certainly in the research and in the academic enterprise overall, and the teaching, learning, and research, I think we have fully embraced and fully incorporated AI capabilities and AI tools into the classroom, into the labs, because of the synthesizing and analysis capability, and of course the generative capability of AI as well. I think the journey in the administrative space has been slightly more disjointed. Also, the comments from Carly resonated, where you have usage at multiple levels that do not necessarily match strategy because it hasn't been fully informed. One of the things that we did early through a task force co-led by several administrators, including our CIO, myself, and several others, was to take a principles-based approach to deploying this technology, making sure that we were deploying it in a way that was both ethical, that had the human at the center, and always human review before any, and disclosure, and before any work product was deployed. The other, I think, important thing about our journey is the recognition early on, and I'll talk share a little bit about our own lessons learned, that the technology is moving at and developing at a pace that is faster than the typical ability to absorb it and to learn it. And therefore, the only way we feel we can learn it is not in a fully structured way, but learning by doing. And for that, we stood up multiple communities of practice that are joined by common interests. So you have an HR community of practice and alumni affairs and development community of practice, where it's a safe environment to practice, but also it's been a great forum, or different types of forums, for people to show their capabilities for talent development, and also for people to learn in a quite democratic way, because you have directors learning from employees, employees learning from directors, and it's just been quite an experience so far.
Great, thank you all. Appreciate you all giving us some context about where you are on the journey. To further that discussion, I'll ask a few of you the next question about the importance of integrating AI into higher education and just sharing how you got started on that. So Jim, if you don't mind kicking us off with that, answering that question, that would be great.
Sure, absolutely. So I think it's essential to integrate AI as much as we can into the classrooms. I'm a big proponent of early adoption of all of this, as you may hear through the next hour and whatever it is that you talk to me. I really think that we need to understand that students are using this technology. Wherever you are, students are using this technology now. Whether you think they are or not, they've been using it. They've been using it for 2 years. And so it's up to us as faculty to help our students navigate its use. If we're not there helping them out, they're going to be figuring it out themselves. And for good or for bad, they're going to be using it and doing whatever it is that they're going to be doing with it. So we really need to be in there showing them how it can be used, what its limitations are, especially for things like bias, but also to remind them, as of right now, there is no I in AI. And I don't mean that isn't like there's no I in team, right? But I meaning intelligence. There is no intelligence in what we're calling AI right now. And quite possibly, there might never be any intelligence in there. So one of the things I think it's important to get across to students is that what they're really going to bring to their future careers, if they don't already have them, but even still, whatever jobs they have later on, is this sort of idea of the critical thinking element that they can bring to all of this. AI is going to be a great personal assistant, a digital assistant for people, but it's really up to all of us, and especially if we're faculty members or anybody at a university, to impart this to students, that it's really up to them to be able to critically think through all of the information that AI is going to deliver to them, and figure out how to synthesize all of that information. And so in a real sense, our job as educators is exactly the same as it's always been. This is just a new tool that we can use to sort of help us out along the way, right? And so one of the things I really also want to mention here is that I think it's very important, and I can't use very, stressed enough, that we really lean into the role of being a guide on the side with our students and really try to stay away from being an authoritarian and a police person when we do all of this. I understand the importance of academic integrity and all of those things, but when you're balancing the scale here, I think it's really important to think more along the lines of helping students develop critical thinking skills and looking at the information that comes back from the AI that they use and helping them reason through all of that, than to immediately jump on them and say, oh, you plagiarized, you didn't, cite this, you didn't do that. It's really important to be gentle and to say, hey, you're learning a lot of stuff with all of this. So I really guide on the side more than, putting on the police uniform and saying, I'm going to, give you 0 points for all of these assignments. Okay, so I think the other part was how I got started. And so I used AI quite a bit in my lab and my research, as I kind of skipped over a lot earlier. But for the audience today, I think where I really got started when I was an assistant dean for science, when we noticed that a lot of our students were struggling with college algebra and stats. And for those of you here, you probably know very well that those two classes are really foundational classes. If you don't pass college algebra, you don't pass stats, you're not getting a college degree. And so because I want everybody to succeed and I want everybody to get a degree that's in a program somewhere, we were really trying to figure out, how do we get these students to succeed and get through this really difficult class? And so what we decided to do was use some adaptive learning techniques and implement that into the college algebra and stats class. And those, I can say, statistically significantly showed that more students passed this class by using these adaptive learning techniques. And so that really set me on the way of, there are a lot of technology-based solutions that students can use. I'm going to say easily with quotes. Obviously, it's not easy for everybody necessarily, but with faculty there and other people involved to help move students through the process, to get them through and to help them be successful. And that's, even today, as the center director, one of the things we're looking at is bringing in some AI-assisted tools into our lab-based classes. We have a teaching lab at Hopkins, and right now we can primarily support people showing up to the Homewood campus to take these labs. But, we have 2,000 or some odd students that are a part of the center, and, we can only fit, let's say, 14 students into our lab at one particular time. So my mind immediately goes to, there's 1900 plus students that can never get into the lab possibly. And I want to figure out ways to do that through augmented reality, through artificial reality, right? Through all of these different things that we can do that are fit for purpose. Because as you guys probably remember, during the pandemic, we had these labs that were good for high school students, but not quite great for undergrads, and certainly not great for my master's students. So we're trying to figure out ways that we can make all of that better.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Yep.
Same question over to you, James.
Yeah, here at San Diego State, we really think of AI as a strategic enabler and a lever that we can use to promote student success, especially as we think about workforce readiness. So I talked about that AI survey that we did in 2023. We replicated that in 2024, measured the velocity of change. For instance, in 2023, it was like 44% of students, 21% response rate, by the way, in 2023, which is extraordinary, which speaks to how important the topic was for our students to see 7,800 students respond to a survey, which we're lucky if we get a 3% response rate. So to see a 21% response rate really speaks to the importance of the topic. Replicated the survey in 2024, included faculty and staff. I know how many people are really focused on staff here on this call, so we'll try and lean into that a little bit. But the data was irrefutable in terms of the velocity of change. So we went from 44% reporting using ChatGPT, for instance, in 23 to 82% in 2024. We're going to continue to see that rise. And that's, again, this evidence that we need to scaffold conversations with the community about the importance. And I was just looking at something from LinkedIn last week that showed a 6x increase in job postings that demand AI literacy skills. And that's only going to increase. In fact, 3 of the top 15 fastest growing jobs in the US now require AI skills. And so that fact that these digital skills are going to be essential in the workforce of today and in the future is really essential for us to be leaning into. 71% of our students in 2023, this is also interesting, same exact number in 2024, 71% of the students said that AI will become an essential part of most professions. Asked that same question, we had over 10,000 students. We had a 26% response rate in 2024 to this survey. 71%, the exact same percentage, which you can't even make this up, right? Said AI will become an essential part of most professions. So that has really informed the work that we've done to build confidence and build skills, bringing staff in particular out of the shadows and giving them permission to use these tools, especially when we're having a hiring freeze here in California. We did an AI Shark Tank with our staff, where we invited people within the One IT community, IT professionals across the campus, to come and pitch ideas to a group of faculty, staff, and students. And they then were given funds to actually translate their vision into action. And the idea there was to really recognize and celebrate those people who were doing exactly what Manuel was saying, tinkering and playing with these new technologies and learning by doing, as he was saying they were doing at Harvard.
And that's a nice segue to the next question, which is really about how are you helping individuals at your institutions feel more open and curious and excited about AI? A few of you have mentioned a couple things around safe spaces to play, non-hierarchical discussions, et cetera. But what's working in your institutions? And I'll ask this question first of Jim.
Okay, sorry, I was typing an answer to a question. So at Hopkins, we're doing several things. And the first and probably the most publicized is the creation of the Data Science and AI Institute that I mentioned earlier. And as a part of this, we're hiring several faculty members in this area. I think we've have about 40 or 50 Bloomberg scholars that are a part of this. And, before January of this year, there were plans to add, tens of more faculty members onto all of this. Hopkins, as everybody probably knows, has a strong commitment to education and strongly believes in dialogue and having faculty that are proficient in certain areas and forming, communities of interest and things of this nature. And that's all seen as a very positive thing, sort of along the lines of a liberal education. And I also mentioned earlier that we're rolling out the AI lab And that we're forming communities of interest. One of the reasons I think that I'm here today is because I'm a part of one of those communities of interest that centers around the elements of AI into teaching. And we've been doing a lot of discussions about all of that. We had a discussion yesterday about AI in the class and in the classroom, and likened it to having the talk. You know what I mean by the talk? That level of uncomfortableness that goes along with that is probably pretty accurate for what you should have with your students. I'm talking faculty, right? To my fellow faculty members out there, when you have that conversation with your students, you need to have that conversation with your students, and there needs to be a certain level of uncomfortableness there, right? You're both learning together and you're both trying to figure all of this out. Hopefully, as a faculty member, you've got a little bit of experience there, but trying to figure out all of this together as a group, I think, is sort of where we all sit right now.
Thank you. Cheryl, the same question to you.
Yep. So thanks, Kat. I would say a couple things. We're doing micro credentials as well at the University of Iowa. We call it Hawk AI certificates, and there's several different levels. Those have been wildly popular as we have rolled those out, and we're seeing those on resumes as people are proud of those credentials. So that's one piece. We partnered with our faculty members in the College of Engineering to help us create those courses and then scale those. There's a general AI course that doesn't need much previous knowledge, but as you go into the certification programs, knowledge of data structures and analytical tools is pretty important. But again, very wildly popular. We are also celebrating success, and we're doing this through AI lightning rounds, maybe similar to the Shark Tank idea, but it is very frequent lightning rounds where we invite the community to share what they're doing across faculty, staff, and students, and celebrating success. I mean, at the core, the strategy here is to celebrate, but also generate new ideas. The ideas generate new ideas and different ideas, and that really is the goal. And I'll take it back down. The example I used on our very specific AI bot, internal facing AI bot, we really invited the HR community to help build that. And we knew we couldn't do it ourselves. So we invited the community to partner with us, think outside the box. The stakes were not high because cost was not a significant part of this because it's fairly economical to get up and running. And that has helped us on a variety of strategies with regards to how do we get community acceptance, but it's also a change management strategy.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So just moving into the next question, as AI starts to show up more in day-to-day work, how are you building your teams or building the skills you need for your teams to use these tools well? So are you using incentives, recognition programs? Cheryl, you mentioned training programs in micro-credentialing. So we'll start with you, James, on this question, what you're doing at SDSU.
Sure. Yeah. I think my number one job, really, especially when it comes to emerging technologies, is providing lots of examples. So we've launched something called the AI in Action video series, which really celebrates our faculty who are experimenting. They are short videos, 3 minutes typically in length, where you have faculty members talking about what they're doing, why they're doing it, and the outcomes in terms of student learning. And that has been really important because we have started to build a library of examples that other faculty can learn from and build upon. And this coming year, we're going to be scaling that up by providing additional incentives. Faculty need time, and it's really important for us to recognize the workload. This is going to require a complete rewiring in some cases of people's assessment strategies. That is really a big deal in terms of the time commitment associated with that. So we're using incentives and some kind of low friction on ramps to fund one faculty member from every major to retrofit a course assignment or an activity with AI. And as part of this 10-hour experience that they're going to go through, they will get a stipend, so they'll be compensated with that. And I think it's really important for them to have the time and space to do this work. They'll be working with instructional designers and our AI faculty fellows to help them with that retrofit. And the idea is not only are they going to do this change, but they're also going to record a reflection that will then, this is one of the deliverables in return for that stipend, that will be added to our AI in Action video series. So we will have examples from every major at SDSU of how faculty are using AI, what the experience has been, why they did it, and what the outcomes have been in terms of students. And I think having incentives and those low friction on-ramps are super important, because it sends an important signal to our faculty that their time and their labor is valued and that it is doable and that they're not expected to figure this out alone. They're expected to be working with us. And I think that faculty labor really needs to be honored and valued. So compensating faculty creates the time and the space that they need. And I'll stop there, but I will say the last thing on micro-credentials is we've seen over 5,700 participants to date. Those are faculty, staff, and students. And those micro-credentials need to be constantly evolving because the landscape is shifting under our feet. So for instance, the faculty staff version is being updated right now and will be ready for our new faculty orientation in August. So really excited about that.
That's great. Manuel, same question to you. How are you all handling this?
So aside from the communities of practice or communities of interest that we've built, I think we've in the past 2 years deployed more funding for, we've had a long tradition, fortunately here, of either presidential innovation funds and vice president innovation funds. And I think there's been an increase over the last 2 years of projects that incorporate some element of AI, and certainly greater emphasis and willingness to fund some of those projects over others. So there's an organizational priority that aligns with the broader priorities of the university. Number two, I think there's been more effort as a number of my panelists have mentioned on both recognition in the form of formal recognition, but also in very, very informal ways for giving people airtime during town halls, et cetera, to showcase some of their contributions, and that is highly motivating for people. The other thing that we have done very deliberately is what I would describe as faculty and staff collaboration. That hasn't always been the norm across higher ed, and Harvard is no exception. And we have found incredible willingness on the part of faculty who is at the cutting edge of some of this research and this work of accepting invitations to different non-faculty forums, whether it's task force meetings, whether it's town halls, or there are other types of staff-focused meetings to not just present their latest research, but actually put it to use during the context of the meeting and make it a very experiential type of event. And then the readouts, there's of course the recognition, but there's also lessons learned. There have been a number of experiments that haven't resulted in the originally expected outcomes. And yet we have also normalized, I don't want to sound flippant and talk about like fail fast as in Silicon Valley, right? But I think higher ed and a place like Harvard hasn't been a place where failure is celebrated. And but I would describe it more as a normalization of the fact that there will be failures because there could be organizational constraints. There may be complexity that is very difficult to create an AI solution that scales up appropriately. And so reading out to the community on some of those failures and the root causes of those have been very helpful for setting up the organization for for continued use and people feeling comfortable with the learning.
Great. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Just moving into the next question. Change is never friction free, as Carly eloquently put earlier today. Have there been moments of resistance as you've tried to roll out AI, whether you saw this in hesitation, fear, or outright pushback? And how did you handle this on with your institution? Did you use things like evidence-based encouragement, job displacement concerns, or did you have job displacement concerns? Were there concerns around academic integrity, et cetera? I'll ask first of Cheryl to answer this question.
So the answer is yes. I mean, whenever you have a change initiative, you need to have a good change management strategy. And for those on the call, identifying your executive sponsor is critical. If that executive sponsor is engaged through all parts of the project, typically you're going to have a successful outcome. But if it's a first kickoff meeting and then you don't see that executive sponsor, it's more challenging than for the project team. Identify what success looks like, your cascading communication, and then staying agile in your projects. So as the technology has changed, it's not a straight a line as far as an initiative goes. You have to be able to go right, left, up, down, whatever the case may be as you change through the implementation. I'll also just talk a little bit about there is so much going on in higher ed right now, and we are certainly seeing change fatigue. And so it really, for me, the question is, how do we manage the broader cultural issues of changed fatigue and really respect people's emotions in the space? So what we identified is maybe it's not they're resisting what we're trying to do with AI. It's unleashed a little bit of a tender spot about maybe some funding that was declined from the federal government, or external factors that are impacting higher education, value proposition for higher ed. So we're in this changing technology along with this very dynamic external environment is really the opportunity for us to lead, but also the challenges on leaning into change management strategies.
Thanks, Cheryl. Manuel, will you share your thoughts on this one?
Sure. So everything that Cheryl said, check. So I won't repeat those, but I would reiterate those. But there's two things that I would describe in terms of both resistance and our efforts to overcome resistance. One very salient one, beyond the natural, fear of new technology and whether that will lead to displacement. We have at Harvard, and I know many institutions probably represented in this call, have labor unions that represent part or even a significant portion of your staff, and even some academic workers as well. And there is significant resistance there. We are seeing in our new round of collective bargaining very, very strong and firm demands for that are, of course, geared towards protecting employment stability, and our demands that are not necessarily, certainly not at this stage, anywhere near where we could accept, because we have to, incorporate new technology into our workflows. That's just part of evolving as an organization, whether you are in higher ed or whether you're in industry. And so that's been one pocket of resistance, and part of how we are trying to address this is in the same spirit that James mentioned earlier, that we're looking at AI as a strategic enabler, not just for workforce readiness, but for workplace stability. That people need to adopt new technology. And I think a lot of the studies, including studies from Deloitte, suggest that the risk to employability does not come from the technology itself, but from lack of familiarity and lack of fluency in the technology. So that message is starting to resonate, but it's something that we're going to have to, as part of change management, continue to reiterate, repeat ad nauseum until people get it.
Yeah. Seeing a lot of head nodding from your fellow panelists on that one. So in terms of lessons learned, for looking backwards, What's one lesson from your AI journey that surprised you? And how would you recommend to other institutions on this call, for example, that they begin their AI journey? And I'll start with you, Jim.
Sure. So the most surprising thing is probably the speed at which this happened. It felt like for a long time AI was this thing over on the hill, maybe over past the mountain somewhere, that it was always there somewhere, but it was never going to be here with us. And then it felt like we all woke up one morning and it's here. But looking back, I probably should not have been surprised that it happened so fast. We had these sort of what's the next word going to be in your text things on your phone, right? Like there were all these little sort of like micro steps that happened that were like eased into our lives that we didn't pay a lot of attention to, which is probably why it felt like all of a sudden AI is here. So my advice for other institutions as they begin sort of their journey is to, of course, it's to start sooner rather than later, right? Like everybody, all of your students are using this. And then I always hate to say this, but at the same time, like your students are your clients, right? Your clients are using it, you need to use it too. But again, I'm going to be a broken record and remind everybody that there's no I in AI. And I don't, do this just to be a broken record, but also as an educator, the more times you say something, the more likely it is to stick in somebody's head. So if you don't walk away with anything else, remember there's no I in AI. But I say this now because it's to remind everybody that, there's no intelligence there. It's not a scary thing. It's not going to take over the world. It's another tool that we can use, right? And so it's not as scary as it might seem to get started, but it is something that we all need to adopt, and we all need to figure out a way to use it somehow in our professional life. And if I'm talking from the perspective of a faculty member, there's a lot of ways that you can use this in your classroom and in sort of in the your general classroom and also in assessing. And one of the cool things that I've seen recently where this is used is actually in a test, right? So you give students your normal test and they can get 100% of the points if they don't use AI at all. But if they're struggling with one particular question, they have the option to use AI to help them answer the question. And what they do is they click on a button and they say, okay, I'm going to use AI. So you know right away that that's what they're going to do. Their maximal number of points drops down to 50%. AI generates an answer. And now it's the student's job to say yes or no, which is what AI generated correct or not correct as an answer to this question, right? So you're still teaching critical thinking. You're still doing all of the things that you really want to do as a faculty member, but you're also incorporating AI and you're also incorporating all of these other things into the situation that help students. But you're also sort of keeping with that idea of academia where we've got academic integrity, we've got all these other things. So you're not getting 100% of your points, you're getting less points, but you're still trying to do all the same things. And that's a kind of a cool new way that I've seen it. There's a lot of other ways to incorporate all of this, but I figured I'd at least mention that because it's something that I've seen recently. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
James, your thoughts on looking back and recommending, ideas to people as they begin their journey.
Yeah, so thinking about Jim's response, one of the things that came as a surprise to me is that faculty aren't afraid of AI. They're afraid of getting it wrong. Mm-hmm. And we've found that most faculty are actually quite curious, but they want trusted guidance, they want some guardrails, and they want time to reflect and do the work. So we worked with our university senate, we created some guidelines for the use of generative AI for assessments and deliverables. So essentially, it's an AI classification guide so that faculty are being consistent. One of the things we heard loud and clear from our students, both in 2023 and 2024, was, and I'll give you a verbatim quote from one of the open-ended responses, just tell us what you expect and be clear about it. Because there was such variance across courses. Some faculty were encouraging it, others were disallowing it. So we need to be consistent in terms of communicating, having those conversations, the talk, as was mentioned earlier, with the students about maybe why you don't want to use it for a particular assignment or why you do. And that dialogue with your students is really important because you've got the trust of your students, that is at risk here. And you don't want to compromise that. It's so important. That relationship with our students is so important. So you have to explain why. And so in this case, with those assessments and deliverable guidance that we've provided. We've worked with our Center for Teaching and Learning, another strategic partner here, in providing lots of examples of how faculty can address this in their syllabus. So again, being really clear about what's expected.
Great, thank you so much. Well, that was looking back. So let's look ahead. What shifts do you see coming in higher education around AI, and how are you preparing for what's next? And I'll go to Cheryl first for this question.
I would comment on a few things. So foundationally, I think data governance is probably going to be important. If institutions haven't thought about data, what are the guardrails? What are the policies? Probably that is foundational in my mind to start down the journey, or to recircle to get that right. That will be very, very important. What are the ethics around all this? You can fill in the blanks on data governance. I think the strategic opportunities with the pressure on higher education are twofold. One, how do we lean into AI on the administrative side to create some efficiencies? And as we create efficiencies, that's probably going to drive a different way for us to organize ourselves, identify units that are more apt to adopt or is in a more transactional in nature. That then leads to our need to reskill and retrain our workforce. With these external pressures on higher education, we need to make higher education a place that people want to come and work. And, speaking in my HR cap, I'm a little concerned about what's happening. And will this be, the employer of choice as people look for opportunities in the future? That probably is not going to be in my time here at the University of Iowa, but I'm deeply concerned about the workforce needs in the academy as we move forward. So those are a few things that I'd just add.
Manuel, over to you and answering this one.
Sure. So this is both a look back based on what we've learned, and then a look forward based on those learnings, how at least I'm thinking in HR about it from a workforce perspective, and I think it by and large coincides with the perspectives of the university more broadly. So number one, we've learned that certainly in environments that are as complex and as variable in terms of business processes and distributed authority, as in a place like Harvard and other large R1 institutions, what we're seeing is that AI is augmentative in nature, and it is not necessarily replacing, but shifting human effort. And I think that's important because that addresses to some extent the fear around displacement, at least in the short term. But we need to figure out if we want to be more efficient, how are we going to scale the use of AI in administrative operations to really obtain the financial efficiencies that everybody seems to be talking about, and certainly in the administrative realm not being able to realize yet. For that, one of the key learning, and therefore one of the actions, is we need to look at business processes. The more bespoke, the more variable, the more complex, the more steps, and the more current human intervention there is to adapt to the process in the business school versus the divinity school versus the research environment, the more difficult it will be to deploy successfully, at least successfully for purposes of achieving efficiencies. You can still deploy it in an ad hoc way, but then what you're doing is investing more, layering more investment, and not necessarily obtaining greater returns of investment. So we're going to have to really look at our business processes and see what can be made more uniform. And the other thing that we're seeing is a lot of efficiency gains, but in the technical space. So we can do, for example, certain HR things better and faster, but so far not necessarily cheaper. We actually have to layer in that additional investment, buy additional licenses for use. And so we are seeing, for example, in applicant screening and applicant matching, great capabilities. We're seeing we're having great experience. We layered onto our PeopleSoft instance, an AI tool that synthesizes feedback from other reviewers. So it's shifting my effort. Instead of me having to read 12 reviews, I can read the synthesis, and I'll figure out whether there's anything that's problematic there. It extracts the main the themes that I can then share with the person that I'm reviewing. But it's really taking it to the next step to figure out how the business process becomes simpler and more predictable so that we can deploy the solution in the future.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, first of all, thank you, panel, for all the information and everything you've shared about your institutions related to change management and what you're seeing. As you can imagine, we have received a huge number of questions, which I know we're trying to answer as fast as we can. We have received a lot of questions about ethics, governance, and safe use. We've gotten a lot of questions about vendors, working with vendors related to those topics as well. So I thought we could start there, just given the volume. And maybe we could talk about ethical use first, and individuals' perspectives on ethical use at their institutions and what they're seeing. I know we've touched on it briefly, but maybe those of you who didn't speak about it, is there somebody who might want to go first on this?
Yeah, I can speak to that.
Okay,
and
great.
it relates also to the looking ahead question. We see a shift as we look ahead, a move beyond simply asking, can I use this tool, to asking, should I use this tool? And if so, how do I do so ethically and securely? And this is moving so fast. We believe that the literacy and responsibility that we're obligated to provide the training and support for have to move with it. That's why we're embedding these conversations into our curriculum and our professional development, indeed into our broader digital transformation strategy. And so that shift from how do I use AI to how do I design for a human AI collaboration or augmentation, that's where we think the real magic will happen in terms of teaching and research and advising and service delivery, just from an operational standpoint. And also want to tie that back to workforce needs. Here in the California State University, we have an AI Workforce Acceleration Board, and we're working with these industry partners from all the tech giants are represented. You've got OpenAI, you've got Microsoft, you've got Google, you've got AWS, all of these really important thought leaders working with us to help define the AI schools that our California employers need the most. And that is a really important piece of this puzzle here. And I want to give a shout out to our chancellor's office. They have an AI Commons that is another treasure trove for us here. All of that information is available to anyone on the planet. So just want to acknowledge the chancellor's office for that good work.
That's amazing. Anyone else want to share anything?
So I mentioned our AI lab a couple of times. Before you get access to that AI lab as a faculty member, you've got a module about ethics, about data usage, and basically, sort of, to put it bluntly, the information that goes into this matters a lot. And sort of a piece around ethics, but also data usage and data sort of entry into whatever module, whatever LLM it is that you're going to use. And that's a required thing for everybody to do before they actually start to use the product.
Yeah. And just given time, we have lots of other questions that are being answered by our panelists and other attendees. We're going to close out, and thank you all for being part of this, but I did want to pass to Carly just to mention what's happening next in our AI webinar series.
Yeah, just thank you again, everyone, for being here. We have gotten a lot of questions in the chat, so trying to answer questions quickly. If we did not answer a question, I just wanted to say, please reach out to myself, to Kat, to anyone on this panel. We're definitely here to continue the conversation. And then also, all of these questions coming in is giving us ideas for future webinar ideas. So we're going to be continuing these webinars. It's an entire series. And I already know there's going to be one coming up on privacy, data, security, because we're getting a lot of questions about that. So just please, thank you. Please continue to join these webinars. And then the QR code right here brings you directly to our Deloitte Higher Ed site. So stay tuned for that. And then there also will be a white paper in the future about exactly what we've been talking about today and continuing this conversation. So just really big, huge thank you to everyone.
Thanks so much, Carly. Thank you, panelists. And have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.